Guys, please mute yourselves so that we can have one meeting. So as I was saying, I need us to have a discussion on two things. Let me just share my screen. See. This one. Can everybody see my screen? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can see
yes.
it. Okay.
Yes, we do.
Just a minute. Okay. So today we're going to have a discussion on identity first, and then we're going to talk about common hate speech expressions. So that is the lexicon of hate speech that is touted as the topic for today's meeting. But before we start on the hate speech expressions, we first have to cover identity. We first have to see why, because we say hate speech is usually targeted towards a particular group. Why are those groups the way they are? Why do we consider ourselves part of one group? Why do we consider other people part of another group? So identity, it highlights what you belong to. So the first definition I would say of identity is sort of either a distinguishing character in terms of personality, or a character that you share with somebody else. So when you identify yourself, you identify not just you, but you identify as part of a group. So I'm going to ask for some examples here. Please feel free, anyone, to put up your hand. I just want a few people, maybe 3-4 people, to tell me, if I asked you right now, tell me something, tell me a bit about yourself, how would you answer? What would you tell me about yourself? Please, I need volunteers. Yes, Yusuf. Yusuf, you're muted, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, your question is very simple.
Yes.
I'm a male.
You're a male.
A male.
Okay. Somebody else had raised their hand, Ian. Yes, John.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear. Please unmute yourself.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I identify as a female, and I identify as a South Sudanese, and I'd rather not identify my tribe.
Okay, as a South Sudanese. Okay, somebody else? Anybody else? Tell me a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, anything. John, yes. John, we cannot hear you. We still can't hear you. Okay, while John is sorting out his technical issues, is there anybody else who can tell me anything about themselves? Okay, let's go with this. So Yusuf has said he is a male, and Ayen has said she's A, female, and B, South Sudanese. So that means in terms of identity, you see yourself as part of a group. And the part of a group that you see yourself as, Yusuf, I hope you're here because I want to ask you a few questions. Yusuf.
I'm okay.
Oh, yeah. I want to ask you several questions in terms of your identity. You said your identity, your male. So would you say, for example, do you have more in common with a woman in South Sudan or with a man in Russia?
Yeah, we share some common characters. Like a woman in Russia have 2 legs like me, have 2 hands like me.
Yes.
But we are different because we might wear different clothes.
No. My question was, do you have more in common with a woman in South Sudan or with a man in Russia?
Maybe I have to put it like this.
Mm.
All men looks like the same, but have different characters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to identity, when you're talking about this group versus that group, so when people are talking about, say, Black people, they're talking about Africans, so if people are talking about one group versus the other, and they're talking about maybe people in Africa, would you identify with those people? Would you say, I identify as one of this group?
Mostly the people in Africa are blacks, mostly. are black people.
Mm-hmm.
So we differ with those in Europe, Asia, because those are whites. So
okay.
Yeah, so people of the same area, like Africans, most of them are black.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but would you identify as an African? Would you say you're part of the group that call themselves African?
Yeah, I'm part of Africa because we share the same continent.
Yeah. So we come to this, it's called the social identity wheel. And it looks at sort of how we identify ourselves from certain umbrellas. So we might take our identity from our gender, as both Yusuf and Ayen have said. Yusuf has said is a male, Ayen has said is a female. So when it's an us versus them, it's maybe men versus, you identify more with your group, you identify more as a man or identify more as a woman. It can be in terms of religion. You say we are Christians and the other people are Muslims, the other people are Hindus. It can be level of education. There's usually people who are lumped together, they're called graduates. There are people who are called high school dropouts. There are people who are called, PhD holders. So in terms of education, in terms of even just what you do, I'm an engineer. So you have this group that you identify yourself as. So some people, when you ask them, tell me something about yourself, and they will say, I'm a doctor, I'm this. So it's a group that they identify with, being a doctor. It can be geographical, the village where you're from, like I was asking about the continent, you can say you're African just simply because you find yourself living in Africa. And so you identify with the other Africans. So when somebody says you Africans, you are part of that group that they are calling Africans. It can be in terms of language, the language. So we are all speaking English right now, despite the fact that we are not from the same nationality, we are speaking the same language. So that can sort of bind us together as English speakers, and we can be part of a group. That goes the same for tribe, for ethnicity, for marital status, for, your class, your age, this whole thing about millennials, about Gen Zs. It's a group identity. And those identities and groups, some of them have a bearing on your characteristics, have a bearing on your behaviors, on your culture, on how you relate to others. So identity in itself is not a bad thing. Identifying and having a place where, or a group that understands you and understands maybe what you're going through and your struggles, somewhere you can sort of call home. Identity is never a bad thing. But now the problem is some people use identity for the wrong reason. It becomes a problem when it is an us versus them, or when you use your identity to try and undermine people that are not in the same group as you are in. So let's see how you come about identity. So our identity is normal to us. It is created and reinforced by the society that you live in. So depending on where you are, if it is in terms of tribe, there are the customs of your tribe. There's how you live in terms of relating to each other, to neighbors. There are ceremonies that are performed. And so those things that form part of your identity, you don't even think about them a lot, by the way, because to you, those things are normal. How you identify yourself, I'm this tribe, or I come from this part of the world, or I come from this family. Even families have their own identities. But identities also change, because when you're a child and you used to live here and your family was like this, that is where you got your identity. Then you left there, you went to school. Your school has its own code of conduct. It has its own, social norms, and it sort of changed. And then you go to church, and the church has its own rules and regulations and norms that they follow. And then you acquire another identity when you're young versus when you're old. Identities are always changing. There's some, of course, that mostly cannot change. But identity as you grow older, because when you're young, when you're born, most babies have really no sense of identity. They will clutch to the nearest person they see. So even if this child is Chinese and it comes here and is brought up by a black person, the child has no real concept of identity at that point. He or she just knows familial relationships. But as you grow older, you start getting your own identity, you start getting your own views, you start getting your own characteristics. But all of these are shaped by the society around you. They're shaped by the people that are around you. They're shaped by how you live. They're shaped by the society and the societal norms. They're shaped by your family. They're shaped by your neighbors. So you really cannot you cannot escape the group dynamics, so to say, of identity. So mostly from the time we were born, as you again have heard, the two people who volunteered the information, they all gave the identity based on, biology. Say, you either, when you're born, everybody asks, even when you're pregnant, everybody wants to know, is it a boy or is it a girl? So that is where now you get your first sort of identity. But then all the other identities will come in as you grow older. So before I move to this, called the pyramid of hate, I just want us to discuss a bit about identity and how it leads to conflict. How different groups of people, when you see maybe you're an African, and then you find another group of people are talking badly about you as a group, not you as an individual. They don't even know you. They have never met you. They've never sat down with you and talked to you, but they have sort of a bias specifically because you belong to another group. And identity, in as much as it is something to be very proud of, should not mean that whatever it is you identify as is superior than the other. So if you have a certain level of education, it should not mean that people who have either a lower level of education than you have done a bad thing or deserve to be verbally attacked, or even the people above you. The people who say this is wasting time, this is wasting money, and start talking badly about other people. So I want to hear from you about identity and how you think even it being a good thing can be misused, especially in terms of gender, in terms of tribe, in terms of education, all of it. I just want to hear from you what you think about the issue of identity and it bringing about bias. Anyone? John, I hope we can hear you this time. Okay. Ayen, maybe you can start as we're waiting for John.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So in terms of a country, a new established country like South Sudan, there's a lot of different maybe culture clashes and identity clashes because people are coming from different areas. People are coming from diaspora due to the war, due to displacement. So you have people coming from maybe Khartoum, and then you have people coming from East Africa, and people coming from the West. So a lot of people have a kind of a mixed up identity that is also associated with the other countries that they're coming from. And then the experiences that they've had either in the other countries or in displaced camps or internally displaced camps. So I think we have a melting pot in South Sudan. And this is a very crucial kind of subject to touch on for the whole nation in terms of forging a national identity that encompasses all the different people. And then we also have the patriarchal and chauvinistic regimes that come from our culture. There's some positive things from our culture, obviously, maybe which are not being maintained. But at the same time, it's very important to think about human rights and how the individual can be protected as a human being. So it's all about how do we forge an identity that is safe and positive and encompasses the rights of every individual of South Sudan.
That's true, especially the places where it's a melting pot. And I feel like in the case of South Sudan, it's exacerbated, but also in any major cities where people are coming from the rural areas, are coming from different places, and they meet, there's always a clash of cultures. There's always especially people who are born into that kind of situation, they don't really know how to identify because your parents are from a completely different culture than they find themselves. And so you find there's a different culture in your house and there's a different culture outside your door. So that clash of cultures and it's not just one person, it's very many families, and that just presents a clash. Yes, Yusuf, what can you add to the conversation?
Yeah, I want to add that we have a general election this year, and we find that most aspirants, women have been elected. So you find some communities in Kenya, they don't allow women to speak in front of people. They don't allow women to vie for seats. So you find some of our communities are really still behind the line because they don't honor some of their women. They don't like their women they dislike to find women in public areas. Yeah. So that is where I wanted it to put it.
Thank you, Yusuf. And you see, this now comes in when there's the issue of identity, and then we ascribe characteristics to that identity. So if we identify you as a woman, then we tell you a woman should do this, a woman should do that, a woman should not be this, a woman should not be that. And it then presents a very big problem for people who want to participate in things that have not been ascribed. Maybe for your culture, they say if you're a child, you should not be seen, you should not be heard, you should not be seen. If you're a woman, then this, you should not participate in this, you should not participate in public governance, you cannot tell people anything. In places like India, when there's where there's a caste system, people of a lower caste, they have their own set of rules, and people identify you with that caste. If you're of a higher caste, then these are your rules for society, you cannot cross this. If you're from a lower caste, this happens. And so most of these identities, I see some of them, again, based in biology, based in geography, but then the characteristics that we ascribe to them, what we ascribe to those particular identities, bring conflicts in the society, because when you go against the societal expectations of your identity, when you're a PhD holder and you're outside there selling maize, somebody is going to say something in that society, because there are sort of unwritten rules every single thing that you identify as. When you are when you're a certain religion and you're acting in some way, there's a particular sect of Christianity in Kenya where they tie turbans on their head. And when you see someone like that, maybe in a bar drinking, it's a big deal, because people identify you with that religion, and they have ascribed things to that religion that you should not be doing. And so what you said, it completely ties very well in that issue of identity and ascribing characteristics and ascribing sort of a set of behaviors to that identity. Anyone else that is not Yusuf and is not Ayen and is not John, to kind
Can
of
you hear me now?
John, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, I wanted to add on the negative impact of identity.
Yes.
For instance, when you seem to favor people from your tribe, that one will lead to tribalism. If you favor people from your own religion, you will have differences with the people from other religion. Because let's say if I am a Muslim and I seem to favor only Muslims, Christians will have an issue with me, so there will be no understanding there. When I seem to favor people from my family only, that will lead to nepotism, and it does not promote unity. So that those are the impact of negative impact of identity. Thank you.
That's very true. Thank you very much. I'll comment on that later. Yes, Asha Charity. Asha.
Yeah, actually, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
What I wanted to add on is that one goes to mostly the HR. Like when it comes to recruitment, then there is some things they can identify someone they may say in a position that this position should be only for men, or maybe should be only for men, for ladies. So sometimes once a job has been advertised and then it has been restricted, so maybe it can come to the side of the ladies. Some of them will get scared that most of the managerial whatever positions are taken up by the men. So there it is bringing something of identity that whereby some people get scared. So it mostly affects ladies in most times. So I think that's the only opportunity I have.
Thank you very much, Asha. So same as what John had brought about. So identity, like we said, is not a bad thing. But when you now start discriminating against people that are not in your group, you give preferences to people in your group undeservedly, and you exclude people that are not from your group, then that part, it becomes negative identity. And all this can be seen here. Yes, Yusuf, you wanted to say something?
To add that even at our household level or home level, in the family, you will find that there is a certain work is made just for women, e.g., cooking, sweeping the house, and soaking clothes. Okay, I find that most of the women or most of the men, they can't do these things. They can't cook. They can't sweep the house. They can't soak the clothes because it is a job made for a certain identity women. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is something I find that starts from when you're extremely young, how you're socialized. There's something called the cycle of socialization. So how you're socialized, the minute you get born and you say either it's a boy or it's a girl, it starts from there. How boys are treated and how girls are treated in the house is so different before they even go out and meet anybody else. So there's always just a divide. You're shown that because your identity is a girl, then there's some things that you do that this other person who is a boy does not do. So it starts from when it's very young. So you start here, you start like this, where there's absolutely no difference between two infants. And by the time they're going to school, the difference is quite noticeable. It is noticeable in how they're treated, like with we have here on the slide, how girls are spoken to and how boys are spoken to when they're very young is so different. We expect, even when a boy falls down, we say, it's a boy, they're tough, he will just deal with it. But that doesn't happen when it's a girl. So it starts showing this girl from when she's very young that there are things that she cannot do. She cannot climb a tree. She cannot go outside and run. Oh, you will get dirty, you will get hurt. But then boys are allowed to go out and explore, and girls remain in the house, clutching on their mother's apron and being taught how to cook and do everything. So by the time they're going to school, there's a very big difference in how these two people see themselves and see others. So if that happens in your home, and then you go outside there and you see other girls, you're going to expect the girls to behave in the same way that you have been taught. But the good news about everything, about all sorts of identities and beliefs about identities, is that anything that you learn that is not cast in stone, you can unlearn them. So let's move on to the pyramid of hate and see how this identity can lead from a very small thing to big conflicts. And here, actually, at the completely top level, we have genocide, which is annihilation of a people. So the first one, it just starts with stereotyping. Oh, people from this area are this or that. Oh, people from this tribe are this and that. Oh, you don't know this people. There's that stereotype that we have of different tribes, of different people of a different gender. We have people of a different country, people of a different race. We say, oh, these people behave like this. But those stereotypes, we just keep circulating them. And it doesn't start from, it's not something that has to start like today and end up tomorrow in conflict. This is something that builds up over generations. So when you're born, you find your parents saying the same things. They say, like in our case, for Kenya, you grow up and people tell you, people from the Kikuyu tribe, they're thieves. They will con you their money. They just really love money so much. And you go on the other side, you're told, oh, Luos, they're very violent, they like throwing. So when you grow up with all these stereotypes in your head. And little by little, these biases you have then inform how you treat that person. So when you go out there and you meet somebody from tribe A, you already have that bias inside you. So that shows you how you treat them. Like Asha has been saying, you are in HR, you've been told your whole life, these people are like this, these people are like this. And that will inform how you treat this person. So when this person, and in Africa, we know each other by names. I don't know if that happens in South Sudan, but in our country, your name, it just betrays your tribe. So they just get those papers and they look at them and say, this person from this tribe, no, I cannot work with anyone from this tribe. I cannot work with anyone from this. I cannot work with a man. I cannot work, because these stereotypes have been ground inside of you little by little by little since you were born. And whenever you see maybe news, because nowadays even news is very biased, the posts we see on social media are very biased, and you tend to walk around with people who form something called an echo chamber. An echo chamber is when you talk, it echoes back. So when you're talking to someone, that person has the exact same thought process as you because of your identity. Maybe you surround yourself with people from the same tribe, you surround yourself with people from the same gender, you just surround yourself with people who identify the same as you. So whatever it is that you say, they sort of repeat it back to you. So in that echo chamber, you just exchange stories that confirm your biases. So if you say Kikuyus are thieves, you'll only just give stories of, that person was found stealing, or that person went away with my money, and that solidifies your biases. And you say, you see, I was right. I keep telling you these people are like this. I keep telling you these people are like that. So those biased attitudes, they already now start forming a rift, conflict between people. And so from the biased attitudes, like we say, you move on to actual acts of bias. Non-inclusive language, insensitive remarks, microaggressions, biased and belittling jokes. I remember last time when we were talking about social media and conflict, Ian mentioned this story of jokes, this story of saying something and then you hide it behind humor. You say, oh, we were just kidding, just joking, or people are very politically correct these days, but you actually mean whatever it is you were saying. So that is, you actually act on your bias. You start calling them names, ridiculing. You start, we're going to talk about it when you get to the lexicon of hate speech. But we start using sort of slang to label an entire people. You call people from this tribe, you call them this particular name or that particular name. You start bullying them, like anytime we come around maybe the election cycle, you find people making posts ridiculing people from this particular tribe, or just outright insulting them and talking, putting their biases into action. And then from the acts of bias, we now come to systematic discrimination, which is what we were talking about in terms of jobs, in terms of HR. So there's a disparity in how people are treated. And by the way, in one of the identities we did not talk about, is about wealth. Poor people and rich people live two completely different lives. Those are, in fact, you find people of several tribes, people of different tribes, but they are wealthy, have more in common. They have more in common together than people from the same tribe, but that rich person has more in common with people from a different tribe that has the same amount of wealth he has than with people who are of a lower economic scale, but of the same tribe. So the criminal justice disparities, when you go report something, you go to a police station, you're reporting something has happened to you, and they look at you and they say, this one is from this tribe, and they don't act on it, and it happens. These are actual things that are happening. Inequitable school resources, this can be anything, can be hospital, anything to do with the government. There are areas that are concentrated on, and there are areas that just lack, that people really do not have, they don't place any importance on it, because most of the time our governments are concentrated on like one or two tribes. The tribe maybe your president is from is a tribe that we say is in power, quote unquote. And so people from the tribe that may oppose him or other tribes that did not support him can find themselves not getting the same resources that that these others are getting. But it can also be very deliberate that they are withholding. They're withholding these resources because they don't think you're worth it. Because remember, we started at attitudes, we went to acts of bias, but now we are at a place where this discrimination is in the government, is in institutions. They're just trying to show you as a people, as a tribe, as a particular identity, that you are not as important to the government. The government will not really care about you like it cares about everybody else. Housing segregation, inequitable employment, we have talked about that. You find you go to a particular department, you just find it staffed by a particular tribe of people. You go to another one that has a different head of department, you find them staffed. There are people who, there are certain tribes who, the minute they just write their name down, chances of them getting a job, especially in government, are quite low. So when it becomes systemic, that means it has escalated to the point of the administration itself is participating in discrimination. Voter restrictions and suppression and equal media representation is very, very, very important. We talked about media last time, and you told me that the media in South Sudan is at least trying to be very fair. But when it comes to a point where the media only concentrates on one side, maybe because of their own convictions or because of government directives, then now at that point it's a problem, because the media has a very big hand in controlling how people think of other people. So if they only bring stories that show a particular people in a bad light, and this happens day in, day out, you start to believe that those are bad people. You start to believe everything that is said about them. And if conflict comes, you can be one of the people who are taking up arms against them because you have been told over and over. And this is in the media, this is on the TV, it's on the news, it's on the radio, it's in the newspapers. And so you say, how can this be lies? But the problem is you're only being told one side of the story while the other people are being shown in a good light. So you don't really have conflict with those people. And then from systemic, we go to bias motivated violence. And this comes with threats, comes with desecration, vandalism, arson, because you've been told over and over, these people, they're like this, they're like that. You do not have a problem perpetrating violence against them. And this violence, most of the time, it's usually sponsored. It's sponsored by other people who have the money. But they always get people who are angry enough to join in the destruction. And of course, from there, it's not a very big leap to move to the act of genocide, the act or intent to deliberately and systematically annihilate an entire people. I want to get thoughts on the pyramid of hate. Do you think this is something that can happen? Do you think those steps actually happen in the conflict that you yourself have seen? Do you think that this pyramid accurately represents the steps that are taken towards violence that is motivated by bias? My people.
We are here.
Yes, Richard Sultan. Richard, hi.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I want to first start by asking one simple question before I go into my point.
Yes.
Looking at the pyramid, which level of
Richard, we lost you. Sorry, Richard, I cannot hear you. Can anybody hear Richard?
Is Kenya I'm saying, looking at the pyramid.
Okay. Looking at the pyramid.
Yeah.
Richard, then can you type your question into the chat box? I cannot hear you.
I think we had a network problem.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Looking at the pyramid, which level?
Which level? What?
Which level does Kenya lie in the pyramid?
That's very good. So in Kenya, of course, we have biased attitudes that we passed a long time ago. The acts of bias, we see it every time, especially in the elections that we just concluded. We saw, especially online, the kind of language that was being spewed. The systematic discrimination, we have lived with it for a while. So I was actually, this is a story that I had from one of my mom's friends. He's a doctor. So it's about, I think, 1974. He's come from Maseno. He grew up in Maseno, and he's come to the University of Nairobi to register because he was coming for a degree in medicine. And so they see people being registered, and they just come in, they're given their forms, they register. So when they go to register, and they ask, please, where can we go register? And the guy says, give me your names. And then he looks at the names and then tells them, we are not registering people like you here. And it's just open like that. And this is the 1970s. It's not even now we can say 2022. So the thing of systematic discrimination, it happens in government agencies. It happens in counties. We moved to devolution to combat the issue of some areas being discriminated against. I would say in the national budget, there are some areas which were not getting the attention that they deserved. And we actually moved to bias-motivated violence. I think for most of us, the only, I would say, major violence we have seen in our lifetime is the 2007-2008 post-election violence, which was directly a tribal thing. And it started exactly with tribe. It started saying, these people have come here, they've stolen our land. There was that conversation that had been going on and on and on and on, and people being told, these people from this side have done this, have done the other. So it was a direct result of this issue of identifying as a certain tribe, and then you fight with another tribe. So we actually got to the bias-motivated violence in 2007, 2008. But luckily, it's something I would say the violence part exactly overcame. We still have the clashes. We have had several clashes, in the coastal area, in the Rift Valley, in northeastern Kenya. But for the most part, for most people, we still lie on the first three levels of the pyramid, I would say.
Okay, thank you. The point I'm trying to make is because I'm working on a piece about trying to compare the level of tribalism in Kenya vis-a-vis South Sudan. Okay. And then I find two things very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The Kenyan level of tribalism only surfaces, it surfaces mostly during election period. But yes, before election period, it is always, it's like a normal thing to find people from different tribal backgrounds sitting in the same pub, they drink, they party together, even in the restaurant, they eat together. It's quite normal in Kenya. Yeah. But unlike our situation here, we might work in the same place, but it is very rare to find people from different tribes sitting in one pub drinking. It only happens unless it is based on when the drinking starts, say, on a business perspective or something like that. But otherwise, people like to always socialize at a tribal level. Okay, that is my own observation. Number two, he did mention something about grouping in terms of tribe, like people give nicknames for each tribe. You know, like in Kenya, I find it very easy and people take it like a joke. Like when you call a Kikuyu Musapiri, okay?
Yes.
He's okay, he doesn't care. When you call a Meru Vitae, it's okay. Even you can tell a child, oh, go to Vitae shop. You can call a Kamba Cafe, he's okay. But here, we also have nicknames for every tribe. But at any given time, if you call somebody by that nickname, that is already like inviting trouble. If you say, for example, I'm sure most of my colleagues here will agree with me. For example, if you call a blinker just in public, you Jenge, because Jenge is like a nickname. If you call one you Jenge, he can
Richard, we lost you again.
With him, like these nicknames as abusive, which I find is quite different in Kenya. People no longer take it as a as a form of abuse.
That is could be true. However, there are nicknames that are insulting, but then there are nicknames that are just taken as nicknames. We call the Maasais Ndauo. We call, you know, the Kikuyu. We do that. But then there are also the nicknames that are derogatory, that are derived from insults. I see you know a bit about Kenya, and there's the issue most people have with Luos and their ways of initiation that are not the same as other people. And so if a nickname is derived from something like that, which people do as an insult, then that becomes insulting. But if it is something that they do, like for example, for them, it's that, and the issue of they say throwing stones. And if it is begotten from something that is insulting, that is supposed to be derogatory to them, then it's a problem. But yes, Kenyans actually do give nicknames to other tribes, and they take it quite well. You're very right. Thank you, Richard. I want other views. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the pyramid of hate. Where do you think you are? Where do you think where you live you are in the pyramid? Do you think that it could lead to something, to escalating a bit more? There's another Richard.
Yeah.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine, Richard. How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Yes, tell us.
In the case of South Sudan, I think we're at a very fragile phase of state because, like I'm sure you know, and I mean, and the purpose of this whole course is because of the multiple problems the country has undergone. I mean, right from pre-independence through post-independence violence, and people have grown up in trauma, lived in trauma, and people have been divided along sectional lines and tribal lines by various groups. So over time, this has built into tensions, into divisions, you know, and allies, and people ally, and then allies, then they fall apart and fight against another group, and tribal discrimination. So I think we're at a very fragile state in that sense.
That's good. Thank you. Yusuf?
I just wanted to share that even resources play a very big, very important role because you find from the area,
Yusuf, please speak up.
From the area where I come from,
okay, yes.
You find there's a land issue. Every community, there are two mainly there are too many communities. So every community is it is suggesting that the land belongs to them. So the issue of land, our sources, it is a great problem, because everyone you find some of the communities are used to fight or to clashes due to a land is an issue. So resources play a very important role. The leaders, if they don't share equal resources to the communities, then it's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. That's true. The issue of land, and what usually interests me in that issue of land and identity is that a tribe can say, you know, this land should belong to us. And so if somebody from that tribe is living on that land, they don't have a problem. But when somebody else who is the only difference between this person living there and another person living there is what tribe they identify as, they would have a problem with that other person. And so when we stop taking people at individual level and start looking at them as what tribe do they come from, then we did not have a problem with somebody being in that land. The only problem we have is that that person should not be from such and such a tribe. And in that way, identity becomes quite negative. Thank you so much, guys. So these are a few examples we had of how this biases in terms of groupings and in terms of identity can blow up from just being biases, from just being discrimination, from acting on it to actual. Richard, yes, Richard.
No, sorry, I think I just forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, sorry, okay, no problem. So we're just looking at examples. And if we take maybe the Rwandan genocide, yeah, where about 800,000 people died in about 100 days. So if we follow the pyramid of hate, we start with biased attitudes, you know, from the time of colonialism, the British colonizers sort of put Tutsis as superior to the Hutus, and this became ingrained. And so the Hutus, of course, if somebody is oppressing you and making you believe that you're inferior, you start festering some negative feelings about them. So the act just started from there. It started with biased attitudes and feeling, you know, these people like that. You start describing these people like this, these people like that, people like that. And it came to a point where in the media, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but you're given these nicknames. They used to call them cockroaches. And so they dehumanize them. Remember what we said last time about conflict. When you want to start conflict with people, you dehumanize them. So you don't even see them as human. So the kind of empathy you would have for humans normally, it does not apply here because you have completely stripped them of their humanity. You call them words. They're called cockroach. They're vermin. They're dirt. And so what do you do with cockroaches? Essentially, you exterminate them. And so language is very important when it comes to the issue of bias. When you start having biased attitudes and you start using language that dehumanizes people. And then, of course, they went to the acts of bias, non-inclusive language. It used to happen even in schools. You go to a school and the teacher, not anybody else, the teacher is telling the children that these people are vermin, they're cockroaches. And so you start to exclude them. The language that they're using is very exclusionary towards this group of people. The remarks are very insensitive. They start doing small things, you know, ignore just when you come to class, when you come to work, and you have a coworker who's of this particular tribe, of this particular grouping, you start ignoring them. You walk away. You don't include them when you're doing something. Just small microaggression things. You start, you know, pouring things outside their house. You start just very, very small things in all the institutions that we go to, in school, in church, at work, in the market, on the roads. It just shows it's an escalation just from the attitude to actually acting on it. And then it now becomes systematic. Yeah. And it went even to the radio. So all the radio were just announcing, these people are this. So it just became ingrained in them. So by the time it gets to the radio, already you have been talking among yourselves, but now it has gotten a stamp of approval. And when you listen to these people talking, both the Hutu and the Tutsis, you listen to them saying what they went through like before. It's sort of they were being prepared for what was to come. And they're being shown. And this thing, if it has the stamp of authority of what you consider to be an authority in terms of communication, it's on the radio, then for you, it now becomes real. Say these people have been saying this in the market, they've been saying this in school, they've been saying this in the church, but now it's actually coming from a source that you trust, coming from what the source that brings you the news. And then from there, it went to threats. Because it doesn't just happen. There was a period just before the genocide when people sort of thought it was coming. The foreigners, the Europeans, they started evacuating. So there were threats. People could hear the threats. They were being told, this is going to happen to you. This is going to happen to you. So there was a lot of fear because there were threats of death. There were threats of arson, threat of assaults. And then from there, anything now, it becomes sort of a set of dominoes. And anything that falls can just completely start whatever it is that is being set in motion. When you look at most of the conflicts, the really big conflicts in the world, there's just a lot of little things that are usually happening, but then there's one thing that just lights the match. And for Rwanda, that was the plane that was shot down with the president, and that was the match that lit. But everything else was already in place. The pyramid of hate had come to its apex, and so I think as a community, as I would say for us, I identify with you because we are a community of peace builders. Then we should make sure that the pyramid does not get to the top. How we do that? It's a start. That we're here, we are talking about these things, and I'm sure from here we're going to go out to the community and talk to people about this, because conflict as it is, it affects the communities across generations. Because even right now, the example that you're given when you go to Rwanda, they still, they're at a place where almost 30 years later, they have gotten past the biggest bump of it, but it still informs how their country operates now. Then we have what is my friends call a personal obsession for me, the World War II, and with it came the Holocaust. And it began the same way. We actually have this sort of campaign at Defy Hate Now when we say it starts with words. No conflict ever just starts. People don't just wake up and start fighting. It always starts with words. It's just what we are saying to each other, what we are saying to people of a different group, what we are printing, what we are posting. It always starts with words. And the first time when people say these words, you don't take them seriously. You think they're joking. You think nothing like that can happen. But words carry power. And when they're repeated often enough to the same person, you keep hearing the same thing over and over and over and over again, a lie spoken enough times either becomes the truth or people just become comfortable with it. And so in our fight against hate speech, for us who have made it our life's work to fight against hate speech, that's why it is so important. People ask us, why do you care? We care because it starts with words. And when you look at what is considered the biggest genocide of the 20th century, which is the Holocaust against the Jews. And by the way, so this first example, we have the genocide in Darfur. I know here there are people who have more information on that than I would ever have just through research. So I'm going to ask you to tell me about this. But when we look at the Holocaust and we go right back to our pyramid of hate, how did it start? First, biased attitudes, against not just the Jews, but the Jews, the Roma Gypsies, against anybody who did not conform to whatever it is the government, that was the line of the government. So the attitudes just started. And it started with small things, blaming them from this. You have this sort of problem, blame these people. You solve this sort of problem, blame these people. So people already have started having this attitude. And it didn't come over 1 year or 2 years. It came over about from the end of World War I to the beginning of World War II, about 20 years. You being told the same thing over and over. And then it went to acts of bias. It went to people being told to boycott businesses by these people. If they live in your house, throw them out. If they belong to your school, do not go to school with them. They take books that are written by authors of a particular descent and they burn them in public. You act on that bias. And then, of course, it went to systematic discrimination, where everybody who was from this particular culture or religion had to go to the government and register, and they were not allowed the same rights as everyone else. They were not allowed to do this. They're not allowed to go to school. They were not allowed to hold public gatherings. So that was systemic discrimination that was sponsored by the state. And of course, it went to bias-motivated violence. There's a very famous incident called the Night of the Broken Glass, where people were allowed to just go to businesses that were being operated by Jews to break in and break everything, burn down their synagogues, just meet. It was an open day for violence, I would say. The people were allowed, just members of the public were allowed to mete out violence on them. So the bias-motivated violence then gives the strength to the people in power to move towards genocide, because you already started by changing people's minds. People did not start out thinking, these people are bad or they deserve this, but with words repeated over and over and over, it changes the attitude. So you become biased, and then you start acting on that bias, and then that gives them the strength to actually begin the systematic discrimination, which goes to bias-motivated violence, and which can finally lead to genocide. So anybody who can tell me about the genocide in Darfur and how that happened? Just brief synopsis. Do you think identity had anything to do with it? Was it state-sponsored? Was there any systematic discrimination? Anyone? Okay, so not just that one, but any other conflict that has happened in South Sudan. Sorry, not any conflict, because this did not happen in South Sudan, but any conflict that has happened in South Sudan, and you can sort of trace how it started. We've already heard from Richard, who's talked about the sectoral differences that have existed for very long. So anyone, like, I just want to see someone who can, take a violence that has happened and just link it to how it escalates from one point to the other. We don't have volunteers. Okay. I know, I think I've been talking for too long. So we've been talking about biases and prejudice. And we're saying it is important for us to act when seemingly harmless acts of bias when they occur. So as we're going about the business of hate speech mitigation and conflict mitigation, we need to nip things in the bud. We can't just say, oh, these people are just talking, or these people are just saying this. We need to be very forefront in the fight against hate speech. when it comes to these platforms. What are you doing to maybe spur on the social media platforms to maybe revise their policies on hate speech? Or are you talking to your own community about it when you see people posting things that are quite hateful towards another community? Is it something that you say? Do you teach people in your community? What are we doing, we can say, to prevent these biases from escalating to the next step in the pyramid? Bias is a prejudice for or against a person or a group. So bias can be positive, can be negative. You have bias for people in your own group. So people from your own tribe, you're biased when it comes to them. So you will always offer them jobs, you'll offer them opportunities. You will sit with them, as we have heard from Richard. You will be doing something, and you can allow yourself, to sit with them and have a good time. But then you can, at the same time, you're prejudiced for your own group and people who look like you and people who identify in the same group as you. But then you're prejudiced against another group and against people from that group. And most of the time, it's people you have not met, you do not know their characteristics, you have nothing against them personally, but just because of their membership in that particular group, that is where the prejudice comes from. And like we say, it can be anything. It can be just not liking somebody, not wanting to. But my mom tells me this story. The very first job she worked, she used to work for Kenyans of Indian descent, and they had different plates and cups for Africans, for Black Africans, and for people like them of Indian descent. And it's just that simple act of not allowing somebody who is a Black African to touch it. You're just showing them we cannot eat from the same plates, or we cannot drink from the same cups. Prejudice can just start like that, or it can just start with a simple comment, and it extends all the way to physical violence and to genocide. And what we're going to cover lastly is common hate speech, but this is in Cameroon. What I want us to look at is common hate speech terms in South Sudan. So I took this from something called the Lexicon of Hate Speech. It is by Peace Tech Lab. They have an entire lexicon of hate speech in South Sudan, but it was done in 2017, 2018. So I don't know if it's still the same, but I have several here. And I'll leave it to you to explain to me this term and what you think of them. I just took them from that lexicon. Just tell me what they mean and what you take from them.
Number one, MTN.
Yeah.
It is used to refer to Dinkas because a particular tribe here in South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
The people who call them MTN are the people who claim that Dinka are found everywhere.
Okay, like now the mobile service.
Yeah, that is it.
Okay. So do you think it's do they do it insultingly? Do you think they're doing it in a derogatory way?
Yes, it was an insult because they were being targeted. They were being targeted physically that time. Yeah.
So somebody's saying some nicknames are not having bad meanings, but it's only the people special, they take it as bias. Can we blame the level of literacy as to how people react to abusive nicknames? Can we blame the level of literacy to how people react to abusive nicknames? I think it's dependent, because I find first, abuse is abuse to people of whatever literacy levels. But I find mostly here in Kenya, when you look at the nicknames that people give to tribes, they're mostly, how can I say this? They mostly come from rural areas, which are not very high on literacy levels. So when you find them somewhere here in the city, people have a bit more tolerance, not abusive nicknames, just nicknames in general. People have a bit more tolerance on it because when it comes to schools, especially higher levels of education, there's no way you can get to some levels of education without mixing with people of different tribes. Because in Kenya, in primary school, you can go to a school that just has people of your tribe. But what they do in secondary school is just try to get people from this area to go to school in another area. And then when you come to campus, it's a complete mixed bag of people. So I find that people who have, I will not say levels of literacy, but I would say people who have been exposed to other tribes and they find it as normal to just sit with and talk to, deal with people from other tribes. They tend to take something a bit more lighter than others, but not abusive, just nicknames in general that are not abusive. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Thor,
Yes.
God of
thunder. Thank you. You know that.
Yes, you're the God of thunder.
Yeah. According to, yeah, I just want to contribute a little bit based on the names on the lexicon.
Yes.
And yeah, like the first speaker said, if you see these names that are used in South Sudan nowadays, most of them are connected to the recent conflict.
Okay.
And the rest are historical from the previous war between the North and South Sudan. If you take the term MTN, this has not been existing before. It started recently, and it was targeting a certain ethnic group, and it also came with it call for action, like when it was directed to a certain tribe, there was kind of rejection from others, and you find this certain particular tribe was targeted along the highways and eliminated from buses and beheaded. You see, so it means it was a name used indirectly to target certain people in buses, so that they are eliminated, they are brought down and killed. And if you take a term Kokora was there, but was not in a good faith. It was there when during Anyanya war and also to SPLA war between the North and South, and it was targeting also certain people, certain ethnic group in South Sudan, and also it came with negative impact on these people, as they were also targeted because of these names. And if you look at the other one, which is Nuerwe or something like this, it recently from 2013 and towards up to this time, from 2013 conflict to this time, when this ethnic group called Nuer divided along political parties, the warring parties. There was this group that remained with the government, and there was this group that went outside and fighting the government. So this one fighting the government, I mean, this one remaining with the government was perceived to be bought with money by the government.
Okay.
You see, Nuer means Nuer money. You see, Nuer is an ethnic name, and Weu, this is in Dinka language. Weu means money. And they were perceived to have been bought by the government to be part of the government. So, and it also has its negative impact on the existing peace and cohesion among the people living within the country, because they don't take it well. And the people naming them do not do it in good faith. And it has hidden agenda, and it has also negative actions against it. And the same thing, if you go to word Nyagat, Nyagat also is historical. This is also directed to a certain tribe or certain ethnic group within South Sudan, because they were perceived to have been supported by the Sudan government by then, when there was this fighting between the North and South Sudan. And these people were perceived to have been getting their support from Sudan government to fight their own brothers who are in the South and have taken arms against the Sudan government. So this name have generalized that particular group is like a word militia, you see, and it also has its negative impact, because once it's used now, it also jeopardizes now the existing kind of peace that people should promote. And and another one is Nyam Nyam. This term, I think, is being used against also certain tribe certain ethnic group in Equatoria in general, by those from Upper Nile region, and just a bad meaning, it has bad meaning and it's not really in good faith. So it is really, I mean, all these names, they are historically caused by the conflict in Sudan then, and also in South Sudan, the Republic of South Sudan that we are now in. And yeah, that is it. Thank you so much.
So now, thank you so much for that explanation. So most of these have actually crossed from hate speech, added the call of action to actually become dangerous speech. Thor, that was a question for you.
Indeed. They
Okay.
now crossed from being hate speech now to dangerous speech, because they have elements of call for action.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So this is a session for questions as we continue to say no to hate. Just anything, because I think, are we going to be meeting again? I don't think so. This is my last session. So I don't know. We have a few minutes, so anything you want to talk about, anything you want to ask. Anyone? Oh, Justin, I'm so sorry, but I think it is being live streamed, so you can see it afterwards, but we also would have really loved you to participate. Sorry about that. Anyway,
Hello.
Yes, Gracie.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I just have a question because I've seen a number of Facebook pages that post a lot of misinformation and, even do the name calling. I tried to report a few, but then Facebook replies with a comment that this has nothing to do. Okay, it has not gone against their
community standards. Yeah.
But if you read this thing, they're really dangerous. So I don't understand how this reporting is done, or maybe there's something that I don't do well. So maybe you can.
I have a question. That hate speech that you see, in what language is it?
They post it in English.
They post it in English. Okay.
Yes, okay. And they really you even see that this post is targeting this community. And when you try and report it, Facebook says it hasn't gone against their standards. So I don't know.
This is the problem I find with a lot of, in fact, right now we actually have a partnership with Facebook to post against hate speech. But for most of them, one, if it is, they usually have what they call keywords that they're looking at that show them this is hate speech and this is not. And it's a bit different because this is why representation matters. And a lot of the people who are sitting at the top there, none of them are privy to any of the issues that are happening here. So if they just write, you write a post that is against a particular tribe, but then the person who is reading over there, it has not hit any keywords for them, and they do not know, it is not one of the things that they put a lot of importance on, then they return and say it is against community standards. However, if you get more people to report, I find most of the time, then they will have to look at it, either mute the page. If a lot of people, if you report by yourself, they can't tell you no. But if you get more people, if you actually just go crusade, get more people to report the page and to report the posts, and they will have to look at it. In fact, most of the time, if a lot of people report, even if they don't see anything bad against it, they will just mute either the post, remove the post, or mute the page for a while as they review. So, Gracie, the way you have been riling us up in the chat to attend the class, now I see, sorry, remote speaking Swahili, I see you are you're usually at hand to remind people when the class is due. So in the same way, I just get more people involved to report, and you might actually see a change. However, all the Facebook platforms, I think, are always working to update their community standards, rules and regulations. So we are hopeful that we are going to see a major change in the fight against hate speech.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ayana, I had seen your hand up somewhere.
She forgot to lower it.
Oh, sorry. It's okay. And first I have to start with an apology. I actually, today as I was going through my things, it hit me. I did not send you last week's presentation. So I'm going to send both of them as soon as we finish, and any other resources I had promised to send. Yeah. Richard, you're asking for my contact. I have my contact there in the WhatsApp group, but let me just put it here just in case. Ayen, yes, Ayen had something to ask.
Yes, I did have something that I would like to ask about.
Okay.
And it was also about hate speech in terms of not just tribal hate speech, but hate speech towards women and disabilities. Is there a way that we can mainstream such kind of training so that people can be more sensitive towards how they talk to women? And there's a lot of insults that go towards women. There's a lot of ageism, a lot of hatred towards women, and also disability. The way that people with disability are treated, the jokes that people make. And then when we come back to tribalism, like we have some communities that have some scarifications, and maybe their teeth have been pulled out because of cultural background. There's a lot of comedy and insults that are forged towards those people who have their teeth pulled out or who've been scarified. How can we address that more? Make it more take basically self-responsibility. How do we make people more responsible, including people maybe in this group? Like, how do we take more responsibility? And then how do we also push for more legislation? Because I'm sure in countries like Rwanda right now, there's a legislation that is against hate speech. Because right now people just do it as a joke. And as you showed us in your trainings and in your presentations, that these things are not a joke. There's a pyramid, and it can escalate at any moment. So that was just what I would like to know more about.
Thank you, Ayen. And I like the fact that you are very optimistic in asking, how can we change people? And I would say it's an entire process. And right now I find online, there seems to be such a big gender divide on the issues of hate speech. I was reading a report that was looking at Kenyan politicians, and looking at online female politicians versus male politicians, the kind of abuse and insults they face online. And it was terrible for the female politicians, because there's this misogyny that is usually just brimming at the edge. And so when a male politician is being insulted, they're insulted by their tribe, their incompetence, everything. But then when women are being insulted, they will be insulted by, yes, their tribe, their incompetence, but also it will go further into threats of sexual attacks, make comments about their bodies, about their ability to get husbands. And you have brought in something else. Whenever we are talking about any ism, tribalism, racism, sexism, you can never talk about it in just one. They usually intertwined. You cannot talk about one more than the other. So when you talk about tribalism, and you talk about sexism, and you talk about ageism, and you talk about discrimination against people living with disabilities, just generally any group that is quite different from what we see as the norm or as the standard, we have, I will tell you, a lot of work ahead of us. How can we make this mainstream? Is we start here. So what we do is, as Defy Hate now, we try to reach what we call, and I will assume here I'm sitting with thought leaders. And even from the kind of discussions we're having and the kind of questions you're asking, it's quite clear we have people who are willing to actually counter this hate speech. And how we make it normal and how we make it mainstream is we always, as usual, start inwards and then go out. What do you post on your personal social media? Do you however your social media is set, either to just your friends or to members of the public, do they know you as a champion of hate speech mitigation? So we start with ourselves, but that can never be enough. And then and so this is why we find ourselves here with programs like this, and we're trying to move this mainstream. We have actually sat down and written an entire guide on just how to mitigate hate speech. And the community is not going to change from what we have seen in our work in South Sudan, in our work in Cameroon, our work in Kenya, in Uganda, the Gambia, Ghana. It's not something that just happens because we told people to. But it's the same way we said in terms of biases. If the message is sustained over and over and over, people will start to believe it. It's the same way we keep on drumming our words in mitigating hate speech. We don't just say it day one, we don't just say it day two, we keep on saying it and we keep on saying it. And third, you can just look for, there's always, I would say there are a lot of people who are in this hate speech mitigation space. And I don't know, if I come across, I can be sending you resources. There are people who actually do campaigns on the ground in terms of hate speech mitigation in schools, in colleges, in churches, anywhere people meet, even just outside what in Kenya we call barazas, just people who, elders that sit outside the tree and sort of just talk about issues that have to do with the community and the village that they're in. And when you have that backing from the community and from peace builders around you, like a group of you, then you can start to put a bit of pressure on the government. So what we do in our, we don't really advocate that much for legislation change, but in any event that we do, we make sure we invite a member of the government. And that goodwill, we sort of try to buy in and have a goodwill with the government. And then they actually are more open to issues of fighting hate speech. And actually not just writing down legislations, but actually implementing it and being with you in this fight against hate speech. It's a process, it's a slow process, but we are in it and we are in this fight. So Ayan, I don't know, I think I have numbers here, so I can be sending you resources anytime I find them about, say maybe organizations that are fighting hate speech in your particular areas of interest. So I have to remind myself. Yeah. Okay. So
Thank you
Kaya,
so much.
You're welcome, Kaya. Kaya Kennedy, you've had your hand up for a while. I'm sorry. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Basically, I'm going to put mine not as a question, but in compliment, like a comment to what exactly Ian has asked on how to really solve or handle the issue of hate speech. Because one, the truth is there is a whole lot of a process. It needs education, it needs a cultural education, civic education, and a lot of things. Number one is because the truth is hate speech, it's bullying, it's intimidating. That's one of the things. For example, I want to use really the context of our country, South Sudan, in what the examples of hate speech that you've listed there. Because if you can imagine someone, a person or a human being called an insect, you see, regardless of the level of education you have, when you encounter such words and you happen to be in one of that group that is being referred to, because it's so intimidating. So one thing is it needs emotional intelligence have to first come in. The fact that it's bullying, so you have to first also go back and refer to exactly the people, what kind of people is trying to intimidate or is trying to put out across this hate speech. Because the truth is most of these hate speech are wildfires that spreads during events that are very tough, you see. So they are also like, if you be able to add on, which means is you are fueling it up. So it's a whole lot, as I've said before, it's a whole lot of it's a process that needs people to come together. It needs champions of anti-hate speech, and it's too big. Yeah, but it's where it begins like this. That's where we'll be able to go down to educate community leaders, to educate individuals, because much as it's hard, but we can fight it. As long as you have that attitude, as long as you've been a victim and you've experienced it. So basically that's where I think we can try to fight hate speech. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaya. And I think there's nothing more to add to that. So if that is all,
sorry for interruption, one more question.
Yes, Richard.
Yes, can I speak? Yeah,
yes.
It's not actually a question, but yes, I wanted to respond a little bit to what my colleague has just said.
Yeah.
Because, we're talking about making people aware of hate speech and those kind of things. But if you also take time to look at the various communities in the country, you will find that the people who are actually lighting the flame of hate speech are the educated ones, not those rural folks who have never been to school. No, those guys, actually, it's easier dealing with them, and they have basically nothing to do with hate speech, so long as you leave them in their comfort zone. Because the reasons why they end up hating is it's these few educated fools that go there and tell them different versions of events. A case in point is the 2013 conflict, where the Nuer tribe had to mobilize because they said your tribe mates who are in Juba are being killed. Okay, so you have to go and
Richard, we have lost you. Richard.
And we also the other things end up flaming up, because the rural folks are easy to deal with. You know what they want and what they don't want. It's just like dealing with any other person. The person has things that he's okay with, things that he's not okay with. But here in our context, it is the few who have gone to school who are actually lighting up the fire, other than trying to diffuse it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard. So I think in terms of education, I believe you're right. In fact, we find even we're looking at issues of hate speech in relation to Ethiopia, and we found out that those pages that are propagating hate speech the most were actually being run by people in the diaspora, people in Europe, people in the US. So I believe you're right. But when we talk about education, what you're saying is we are trying to show people that when you see this thing that is written here, or when people come and tell you this thing, we just make them aware that there are people who are like this and there are people who say this. So whether it's in the rural areas, so we're talking now to the audience, we're talking to the hate speech audience, and we're telling them, be very aware that these people will try and tell you this. And if we create awareness among the people to whom the message is directed to, then we have a chance of fighting it. Then they will not have people to come tell. So we teach people how to recognize this, we teach people how to combat it. So when this, quote unquote, to quote you, few fools who come and try and rile people up. So what we're trying to teach the people is how to deal with these people who come and propagate hate speech. Because these people who are educated, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing is wrong, and they do it fully understanding. Some of them are sponsored. Some people are usually paid to do that in terms of blogging and just spreading. So we get to a point where we tell people, you cannot always just believe everything you read. You cannot believe everything you see. When these people tell you that, take a moment, we try and get people not to be influenced to a degree where they can start committing violence. And I hope each and every one of us takes that as a call to action to go out there and create awareness and tell people this is an actual problem that happens, and this is something that is going to drag us back into conflict. Yeah, spread awareness and combat hate speech in whatever form you find it, I would say. So thank you, everyone. I don't think I have had such an interactive class as this one, so I'm very grateful. And I hope we can meet in this conflict mitigation space in other areas. I would love to come and see, to participate in activities that have been initiated by people from this particular cohort. And we will support up to whatever it is that we are able to. So thank you guys so much. And I hope to continue the conversation. I hope we will continue the conversation. Yes, Modi. Modi,
Hi,
Moses is behind us. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was doing was I was just clapping for what you have said. It has been a very good interactive session, basically. So
Okay.
one has learned something, yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So if that is all, guys, please, if I have not sent, if I have not sent you the presentations by the end of the day today, kindly remind me, because it might slip my mind again. But other than that, so I'm going to wish everyone an amazing evening.
Have a good
weekend. Enjoy the rest of your week. I know the weekend is already here, but enjoy the rest of your weekend. And goodbye to everyone.
bye. Stay blessed.
You too.
Since Dida is not around, so the attendance will be shared later.